Offensive or the Ludendorff Offensive. Just so that we're all absolutely clear, this is the same thing, okay? It can be called the Ludendorff Offensive or the Spring Offensive in the exam, and you're going to need to be able to react to that. So, what happened then? Well, quite straightforward really. At the beginning of 1918, Ludendorff, who was one of the German generals, decided that they needed to do one last attempt at trying to win this war. And they knew they would have to do that because obviously they had a little bit of a boost in November 1917 because Russia had pulled out of the war, so maybe all was not lost. And now they were just going to try and give one last effort and see if they could win. They knew if this failed, they really knew they'd lost the First World War. So it starts in March 1918. And what the plan was is Ludendorff thought, instead of just sending all the troops over the top all the time like they did, they used to blow a whistle and everyone would run over, they were going to try and do it in shorter, sharper bursts. So bursts of stormtroopers, so 50 stormtroopers at a time would go over the top. So this was lightly equipped German soldiers, so they had some equipment with them, but not loads, so they could run quickly, you know, at the enemy. And this obviously would be confusing for the enemy because it was something they hadn't seen before. So that's what they start doing. So they start with a week-long bombardment onto the enemy trenches, which is nothing unheard of, that was the usual tactics. But then they sent them over in waves of 50. Now this worked really well to start with, and in fact, at the start of the Ludendorff Offensive, they took 64 kilometres off the Allies, off Britain, you know, France and, you know, America. Now, the thing about this was really significant because it actually looked like maybe the Germans could possibly break through. But the problem was, because they'd moved so swiftly, because they were lightly equipped and things, they actually started to outrun their supplies, which was a problem. So they were running at a quick pace, but then the supplies were getting further and further away from them. And also at this point, because it was 1918, a lot of the troops were not as well disciplined as they had been at the very start of the war. They were now relying on sort of younger boys to go to war, older men that would have been out the age range. And it wasn't that we talk about ill discipline in terms of naughty, that it doesn't mean that. What it means is as well, they weren't as well trained and they didn't know as much what they needed to do. So this was a problem for the Germans. They were on to the last sort of people to send to war, if you like. So that was also an issue that they were facing too. Now, what happened in terms of us fighting back was they pushed the Allies back, but then the Allies counter-attacked. Now, they counter-attacked in something that's called the 100 Days. And the 100 Days is from the August to the October of 1918. So what happens here is, and this is really important in terms of the Spring Offensive failing, is just before it starts, on the 8th of August really, which is when it roughly starts, at the end of July, we'd given ourselves some objectives, sort of things that we needed to take off the Germans. And the Allies managed to get those things off the Germans in less than 90 minutes. That just shows how we really started to push back against the Germans. If you've achieved all your objectives for the day in 90 minutes, that's going to be a big problem for the Germans. And the 8th of August is known as a black day for the German army, because in one day we forced them back 17 miles. Remember, in 4 months we'd only moved them 5 miles. So the fact that we took 17 miles in one day does suggest that the Germans are really going to struggle here. So in the 100 days, it was Haig and Foch, General Haig for Britain and General Foch for France, that helped to mastermind this. And in those 3 months, that's like roughly 100 days, they pushed back Germany to where virtually the Hindenburg line is, which is the line really, which is the furthest back they would ever want to be going. So we virtually get them completely out, not quite, but virtually completely out of Belgium and France, which is where we want them to be, on the perimeters there. So we do that, and obviously it's a really successful counter-attack. And obviously then they're starting to think, the Germans, now beginning in November of 1918, they're not going to be able to fight back, so they need to start to think of how could they possibly end this war.